July 4th, 1987, 10:23 p.m., Metrodome, Minneapolis, Minnesota. 29-year-old Prince Rogers Nelson was deep into the guitar solo that had made Purple Rain immortal. His purple Telecaster crying through the stadium speakers as 50,000 voices sang his lyrics back to him, when something in the front row made his fingers freeze on the frets. There, barely visible behind the security barrier, sat the tiniest figure he had ever seen at one of his concerts. An 8-year-old girl in a wheelchair, her chemotherapy bald head covered by a handmade purple bandana, tears streaming down her pale cheeks as she mouthed every single word to the song that had become her prayer during 6 months of fighting for her life. Prince stopped playing so abruptly that his band stumbled to a halt, creating a silence so sudden that 62,000 people held their breath in confusion. Walking to the edge of the stage, Prince knelt down and spoke directly to the child whose courage was radiating through the massive arena like a beacon of pure light. "What's your name, beautiful angel?" When 8-year-old Sarah Chen whispered back, "Sarah. And I'm not scared anymore because your music taught me how to be brave." Prince's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the same moment, setting in motion 13 minutes that would become the most legendary act of compassion in music history and create a ripple effect of healing that continues to save lives 37 years later. If you believe that true artistry reveals itself not through perfect performances but through perfect love, and that some moments transcend entertainment to become miracles that remind us what it means to be human, please subscribe to discover how one dying child's courage transformed a rock concert into a religious experience that still brings grown men to tears just hearing about it. Sarah Chen's battle with acute lymphoblastic leukemia had begun on December 3, 1986, when her parents, David and Lynn Chen, noticed their vivacious second grader was losing weight rapidly and seemed exhausted after the simplest activities. The diagnosis came 4 days later at Children's Hospital of Minneapolis, delivered by Dr. Rebecca Martinez, in words that felt like physical blows: aggressive cancer, immediate treatment required, survival uncertain, despite their best efforts. What followed were 6 months that redefined suffering for the Chen family. Sarah endured chemotherapy sessions that left her violently ill for days, radiation treatments that burned her skin, and countless procedures that would have broken most adults. Her thick black hair fell out in clumps during the second week of treatment. Her vibrant personality faded into quiet acceptance of pain that no child should have to understand. The dancing 8-year-old who had performed in her school's talent show became a hollow-eyed patient whose small body bore needle marks like a roadmap of medical intervention. But music became Sarah's lifeline in ways that amazed her medical team. During her darkest moments, when nausea made eating impossible, when pain medications couldn't touch her suffering, when fear threatened to consume what remained of her childhood, Sarah would ask the nurses to play Prince's music. Purple Rain became her anthem. When doves cry, her meditation Let's Go Crazy, her reminder that joy could exist even in hell. "I've worked pediatric oncology for 15 years, said Nurse Patricia Williams, who cared for Sarah throughout her treatment. "I've seen children handle unimaginable circumstances with courage that humbles adults. But Sarah was different. When Prince's music played, she didn't just endure her treatments, she transcended them. She would sing along during chemotherapy, her tiny voice getting stronger as if the music was actually healing her from the inside out. Dr. Martinez had delivered the final verdict on June 15, 1987. The cancer had spread beyond what aggressive treatment could address. Sarah's white blood cell counts were dropping to levels incompatible with survival. They were looking at weeks, possibly days, not months. The conversation took place in Dr. Martinez's office while Sarah slept in her hospital room, sedated against pain that was becoming impossible to manage. "How do we tell an 8-year-old that she's dying?" Lynn Chen asked through tears that had become her constant companion over the past 6 months. "We tell her the truth with as much love as we can carry," Dr. Martinez replied gently. and we make sure her remaining time is filled with everything that brings her joy. David Chen, a software engineer who had spent his career solving complex problems through logic and persistence, found himself facing a problem that had no solution, an equation that couldn't be balanced, a system failure that no amount of intelligence could repair. "What does she want?" he asked, his voice breaking on words that felt like admitting defeat. "She talks about Prince constantly," Lynn replied. "She calls his music her brave medicine. She says when she listens to Purple Rain, she can imagine herself dancing again." The idea formed slowly, built from desperation and fueled by the kind of parental love that refuses to accept impossibility. Sarah had been asking about Prince's upcoming concert at the Metrodome for weeks, ever since the local news had covered his return to Minneapolis for what was being billed as the largest single-artist concert in Minnesota history. The show had sold out in 17 minutes, but Sarah didn't understand concepts like sold-out shows or ticket prices, or the impossibility of taking a terminally ill child to a stadium concert. "Mama," Sarah had whispered during one of her rare conscious moments, "do you think Prince knows that his music makes sick kids feel better? Do you think he knows that Purple Rain is like medicine for hearts that are breaking?" That's when Lin Chen decided that impossibility was just another word for something they hadn't tried hard enough to achieve. Getting tickets required a miracle, but Minneapolis had always been a city that took care of its own. Lin's story reached KARE 11 News through a chain of friends and acquaintances who understood that some stories needed to be told. When reporter Jennifer Walsh interviewed Lin about children fighting terminal illnesses, she mentioned Sarah's dream of seeing Prince perform before she died. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The television station's phone lines lit up with calls from strangers offering to donate tickets, money, whatever the Chen family needed to make Sarah's dream possible. Local businesses began fundraising. The entire Twin Cities area seemed determined to help a dying little girl meet her musical hero. But the real miracle came when Prince's management team saw the news segment. They didn't just arrange tickets, they coordinated with Children's Hospital to ensure Sarah would have a complete medical support team at the concert. They arranged special wheelchair-accessible seating in the front row. Most importantly, they briefed Prince himself about the courageous little girl who would be in his audience, though no one anticipated how profoundly her presence would affect him. July 4, 1987, was supposed to be Sarah's last night outside of the hospital. Dr. Martinez had agreed to the concert attendance only because she understood that some experiences were worth any risk, and because she knew that Sarah's time was so limited that conventional medical caution had become irrelevant. The Metrodome that night was electric with anticipation. Prince's homecoming concert had attracted not just his Minneapolis faithful, but fans from across the Midwest who understood they were witnessing something special. The energy in the stadium was palpable from the moment the doors opened, building throughout the opening acts until Prince finally took the stage at 8:47 p.m. to the loudest ovation in the venue's history. For Sarah, every moment of the concert was magical in ways that transcended her physical condition. She had been heavily medicated for pain management, but the music seemed to energize her in ways that amazed her parents and the medical personnel who had accompanied them. She sang along to every song she knew, her small voice lost in the massive crowd but carrying more joy than David and Lynn had heard from their daughter in months. Prince's performance that night was extraordinary even by his standards. He was playing for his hometown, celebrating Independence Day, and delivering what many critics would later call the definitive live version of his greatest hits. By the time he reached Purple Rain, always the emotional climax of his concerts, the entire stadium was singing along with religious fervor. But 18 songs into the show, during the extended guitar solo that typically brought Purple Rain to its crescendo, Prince's eyes found something that changed everything. Sarah Chen was illuminated by the stage lights, tiny and fragile in her wheelchair, wearing the purple bandana that Lynn had sewn with Prince's symbol. Tears of pure happiness streaming down her face as she sang along to words that had carried her through the darkest period of her short life. Prince had performed for presidents, royalty, and millions of fans around the world, but he had never seen anything like the expression on Sarah's face. Here was a child who was dying, who had every reason to be consumed by fear or anger or despair, instead choosing to spend what might be her final public appearance celebrating music that had given her strength when strength seemed impossible. Prince stopped playing so suddenly that his guitar feedback created a sharp sound that cut through the stadium like a blade. He raised his hand, signaling his band to stop, and walked directly to the front edge of the stage. The silence that followed was so complete that people in the upper decks could hear Prince's footsteps on the stage floor. Kneeling at the very edge of the stage, Prince looked directly at Sarah, with an intensity that made everyone in the front sections understand they were witnessing something unprecedented. "What's your name, beautiful angel?" Prince asked, his voice carrying through his wireless microphone to every corner of the Metrodome. Sarah's response was barely audible, weakened by months of treatment, but Prince's microphone picked up her whispered answer, "Sarah, and I'm not scared anymore because your music taught me how to be brave." The words hit the stadium like an emotional tsunami. David and Lynn Chen, sitting beside Sarah's wheelchair, began sobbing as they watched their dying daughter connect with the person whose music had sustained their entire family through the most devastating period of their lives. Around them, construction workers, business executives, teenagers, and grandparents found themselves crying openly as they witnessed pure innocence expressing profound truth. Prince himself was visibly moved in ways his fans had never seen. Here was an artist famous for his emotional control, his mystique, his ability to maintain professional distance from his audience, and he was weeping openly at the sight of an 8-year-old whose courage had humbled him completely. "Sarah," Prince said, his voice breaking with emotion, "you are the bravest, most beautiful soul I have ever encountered. You have just taught 62,000 people what real strength looks like. You have reminded us why music exists, not to make us famous or rich, but to give us hope when hope seems impossible, to help us find light in the darkest places, to prove that love is more powerful than any force that tries to defeat it." Prince stood up, his decision already made. "Sarah, my brave princess, would you like to come up here with me? Would you like to help me finish this song and show everyone what it means to choose joy over fear?" The question sent shockwaves through the arena as 62,000 people realized they were about to witness something that had never happened in major concert history. Security personnel moved quickly but gently, coordinating with the medical team to lift Sarah from her wheelchair and pass her carefully up to Prince, who received her like she was made of glass and starlight. The sight of Prince holding this tiny, fragile child on the stage of the Metrodome while 62,000 people watched in absolute silence was so powerful that thousands of people began crying before any music resumed. Here was one of the world's biggest superstars, and there was a dying little girl whose courage had somehow bridged the impossible distance between performer and audience to create a moment of pure human connection. Prince carried Sarah to center stage and positioned her beside his microphone stand, then knelt beside her so they were at the same height. Under the stage lights, Sarah looked even more fragile than she had from the audience, but there was something in her eyes, a light, a determination, a joy that cancer couldn't extinguish, that made Prince understand he was in the presence of someone whose spirit was indestructible. "Sarah, my angel," Prince said, speaking directly to her while his microphone ensured that every person in the stadium could hear his words. "Can you help me sing Purple Rain for all these people? Can you show them what it sounds like when courage sings? Can you teach us what hope looks like when it refuses to surrender?" Sarah nodded with an energy that seemed to defy everything her medical team understood about her condition. Being on stage with her hero appeared to have temporarily reversed months of deterioration, giving her strength that came from pure joy rather than medical intervention. Prince signaled to his band to resume the song, but at a slower, more intimate tempo that accommodated Sarah's weakened voice, while allowing every word to carry clearly throughout the stadium. When they reached the chorus, purple rain, I only want to see you underneath the purple rain," Sarah sang along with a clarity and emotion that transcended her physical frailty and created something that every person present recognized as sacred. Her voice was small, obviously affected by her illness, but it carried an authenticity and purity that made professional singers in the audience weep with recognition of something they had spent their careers trying to achieve. This wasn't technique or training. This was a soul expressing itself through music in a way that bypassed every artificial barrier between performer and audience. During the song's instrumental bridge, Prince kept his arm protectively around Sarah while addressing the 62,000 people who had become witnesses to one of the most profound demonstrations of human courage any of them would ever see. "Everyone here tonight needs to understand something," Prince said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had just been humbled by true greatness. "Sarah has been fighting for her life for 7 months. She has endured treatments that would break most adults. She could be feeling sorry for herself, giving up hope, surrendering to fear. Instead, she chose to be here with us, showing us what real bravery looks like, teaching us that some battles are won not by defeating the enemy, but by refusing to let the enemy defeat your spirit." The stadium was completely silent except for the soft sounds of thousands of people crying. "Look at her," Prince continued, gesturing towards Sarah, who was gazing up at him with complete trust and adoration. 8 years old, fighting cancer, facing things that terrify adults. And she's still choosing joy, she's still choosing music, she's still choosing hope, she's still choosing love. Prince looked out at the crowd, his eyes finding faces in every section of the stadium. "Sarah, you have taught me something tonight that I will carry for the rest of my life. You have reminded me that music isn't about entertainment or fame or success. It's about connection, healing, hope. It's about proving that some things are stronger than death, stronger than fear, stronger than anything that tries to destroy what makes us human." As the song reached its natural conclusion, Prince made a decision that surprised everyone, including his own management team. He took off his iconic purple jacket, the jacket that had become as much a part of his identity as his music, the jacket he had worn during countless legendary performances around the world, and wrapped it around Sarah's tiny shoulders. "Sarah, my brave princess," Prince said, his voice filled with emotion that moved 62,000 people to tears. "This jacket has been with me through hundreds of concerts in dozens of countries. It has been on stage, at Madison Square Garden, Wembley Stadium, the Forum. But it has never been worn by anyone more deserving, anyone braver, anyone more heroic than you." Prince knelt down so he was at Sarah's eye level, speaking directly to her while the microphone ensured that everyone in the stadium could hear his promise. "This jacket is yours now, forever, because heroes deserve to be recognized, and Sarah, you are the greatest hero I have ever had the privilege to meet. You have shown 62,000 people what it means to choose love over fear, hope over despair, joy over sorrow. You have reminded all of us what it means to be truly alive." The Metrodome erupted in the loudest, most sustained ovation in its history. 62,000 people stood and applauded not just for Prince, but for Sarah, for the courage she had demonstrated, for the beauty that had emerged from tragedy, and for the reminder that some moments transcend entertainment and become shared experiences of human connection at its most profound level. Prince carried Sarah back toward her parents, but instead of immediately returning her to her wheelchair, he sat on the edge of the stage with her in his arms and continued speaking to her, while the entire stadium listened to what felt like the most important conversation any of them had ever witnessed. "Sarah, my beautiful angel," Prince said, his voice filled with a tenderness that few people knew he possessed, "I want you to know that you will always be part of my family. Not just tonight, not just because of this moment, but forever. Do you understand? Forever means forever." Sarah nodded solemnly, her small hands clutching the purple jacket that now belonged to her. "Whenever you need anything, medical treatments, special experiences, someone to talk to, someone to sing with, you call me. You don't ask anyone's permission. You don't worry about bothering me. You call, because family doesn't abandon family, and you are my family now." Prince pulled out a card from his pocket, his personal contact information that he rarely shared with anyone, and handed it to David Chen, who was crying too hard to speak. "David, Lynn, this is my personal phone number, my home number. Sarah is now part of the Prince family forever, and that means both of you are too. You use these numbers whenever Sarah needs anything, whenever you need support, or whenever you just want to talk to someone who understands that your daughter is the most extraordinary person any of us will ever meet." The impact of Sarah's 13 minutes on stage extended far beyond that Independence Day evening. She lived for 4 more months, 4 months that her parents later described as the most meaningful and joyful of her short but incredibly impactful life. Sarah spent her remaining time wearing Prince's purple jacket during every hospital visit, the oversized garment becoming her armor against fear, her tangible connection to the most magical night of her life. The hospital staff marveled at how Sarah's spirits remained high even as her body grew weaker, how she continued to sing Prince's songs with a smile on her face, how she spent her time comforting other children in the cancer ward by telling them about the night she sang with Prince in front of 62,000 people. Prince kept every promise he made to Sarah and her family. He called every Sunday, spending hours talking with Sarah about music, about her dreams, about the songs she was learning on the small keyboard he had delivered to her hospital room. These weren't publicity opportunities or charitable gestures. They were conversations between family members who had connected on a level that transcended fame and circumstance. When Sarah's condition deteriorated rapidly in late October, Prince didn't hesitate. He canceled a recording session in Los Angeles and flew to Minneapolis, spending an entire day at Sarah's bedside in Children's Hospital, singing quietly with her, holding her hand, and reminding her that their friendship would continue beyond anything that happened to her physical body. Sarah Chen passed away on November 8, 1987, surrounded by her parents, the medical staff who had become her extended family, and Prince, who had driven straight from the airport after finishing a concert in Chicago the night before. Her final words, according to the nurses present, were sung rather than spoken, a few lines from Purple Rain that she whispered while Prince held her hand and promised her that the music would continue forever. At Sarah's funeral 4 days later, Prince arrived unannounced and asked David and Lynn if he could perform one song for Sarah. Standing at the front of the small church, Prince sang Purple Rain acoustically, wearing a purple jacket identical to the one that Sarah was buried in. His voice broke multiple times during the performance, but he continued singing because he had promised Sarah that he would, because some promises transcend death and become eternal commitments. The funeral was attended by over 800 people whose lives Sarah had touched during her brief but profound time in the world. Hospital staff, other families fighting cancer, strangers who had been moved by her story, fellow musicians who came to honor both Sarah's memory and Prince's extraordinary love for a little girl who had taught them all about courage. Sarah's 13 Minutes with Prince inspired the creation of the Purple Rain Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research and Family Support Services. The foundation, which began operating in 1988, has since provided over $75 million in funding for childhood cancer treatment and research, while also creating programs that bring musical experiences to hospitalized children around the world. When Prince died in 2016, the Purple Rain Foundation issued a statement that honored both their founder and the little girl who had inspired his greatest act of compassion. Every child we have helped, every family we have supported, every medical breakthrough we have funded exists because Sarah Chen taught Prince that some moments are more important than any performance, and that true artistry means using your platform to honor courage wherever you find it. Today, the Metrodome no longer exists, but the exact spot where Prince knelt to speak with Sarah is marked with a purple star embedded in the concrete of the new U.S. Bank Stadium. The inscription reads, July 4, 1987, the night Prince learned that the most beautiful music happens when artists remember that their real job is healing hearts that are breaking. Sarah Chen lived only 8 years and 4 months. But her 13 minutes on stage with Prince created a legacy that has touched thousands of lives and will continue inspiring acts of compassion for generations to come. She proved that heroes come in all sizes, that courage can emerge from the most fragile circumstances, and that some connections transcend the boundaries between performer and audience to become shared celebrations of the human spirit at its most resilient and beautiful. Prince Rogers Nelson discovered that night that legendary moments happen not when artists perfect their performances, but when they recognize that some people in their audience need something more precious than entertainment. They need to know that their courage has been witnessed, honored, and celebrated by someone who understands that true greatness means lifting others up exactly when they need it most. If this story reminds you that the most powerful moments happen when we choose connection over performance, and that true legends are made not by what they achieve for themselves but by what they give to others who need hope, please subscribe to keep Sarah's story alive. Because the world needs more reminders that some interruptions are more important than any show, and that the greatest artists are those who understand their real purpose is healing hearts that need to know they are not facing their battles alone.